What up? What up? Welcome back to the Sneaker History Podcast. My name's Nick Ingval. Got a special episode today. Going to talk about some potential retro product for 2021 and just kind of revisit some of the shoes that came out in I guess historical anniversaries. And got my guys Robbie and Rowett, but I've also got Marvin MJO23 Dan with us to kind of be our expert on this subject matter, so to speak. So, what's good, fellas? How you guys doing?
Subject matter expert, I believe is the term.
Yeah,
Smee.
Appreciate you guys having me on.
of course, man. Of course. If you are not familiar with Marvin, just actually, I'm going to let you give a little brief intro. But we had you on the podcast. Man, I guess it's been about a year now since we did the airship conversation from early in last year. But maybe give like a quick intro and background on your storyline in this whole sneaker game.
Yeah, so what's up, guys? It's Marvin, also known as MJO23 Dan. I don't know, I've probably been doing the YouTube thing, social media thing since 2013. But I've always been a longtime collector of Air Jordans, Nikes, but mostly Air Jordans. That spans back to like 1995 when I got my first pair of Concord 11s. I was 15 at the time and just skyrocketed from there. So um, just really happy to share like anything that comes to mind when it comes to like the collector mentality. I guess preserving sneakers in a sense. Just really seeing the ups and downs of OGs to retros to re-retros to re-retros, and just going through the whole cycle of like how Jordan Brand tries to maintain the nostalgia that we all like want to captivate. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I think we kind of connected probably Soul Collector forums, right? In like the mid 2000, maybe early 2000, late 2010, sure, 2000s. I don't. That sounds weird, but like let's say 2007, eight, somewhere in there, right? In the forums, and you know, I always admired your ability as admin mod god of the forum, so to speak, like navigating all of that, but also like just always providing this kind of like crucial information that we've talked about even on that airship podcast. One of the things that I both love and hate about sneakers is the brands doing the storytelling in a way that doesn't always bring the truth to light. And it's a good thing to have someone like yourself who kind of like you're not trying to call anybody out, but you're like trying to make sure that the real story and the marketing story run in parallel, right? And your collection and your approach to this has been really fascinating to me as someone who's gotten to know you over the years, because I think that as we're getting into like this year specifically being you have this whole new generation of sneakerheads that maybe know of 2001 and the cool gray 11s and like the kind of like epicness that happened in 2001. I mean, it really was like a next level of like, wow, there's a lot of stuff coming. And that also is like an interesting way to look at, and I would love to hear what you think about it, because in one sense, it's like I'm happy to see. I mean, personally, I'm always happy to see retro product come out because I think that it gives people like us an opportunity to tell our stories that connect, that sometimes are even better at encouraging and inviting people into the sneaker community than the brands themselves, right? Because at the end of the day, the brands have to prioritize so much and they're releasing so much product. They just don't get to tell all the stories to the full aspect of what they should. But do you think that with the like thinking on those like annual, like traditional anniversaries, right? Do you think that you know as the shoes come back out, like you said, in a retro, re-retro, re-retro, does that take away from anything for you on either the nostalgia side or just in the nature of like you wanting to collect? And how do you approach thinking about like, oh, I'm gonna get this because it's, a part of my set, or not, right? Like, obviously there's always these new colorways and, twists and turns, but you always do a good job of showcasing the differences throughout the years. But like, at some point you probably say, like, that's not for me this time around, right? And like, what's that process like for you?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where you have to pick and choose your battles because you can't really get, well, I mean, I can't. I know I can't speak for everyone else. I can't get every single retro that comes out. It really depends. I just think it's well, so how this whole comparison thing came about is I was really fascinated to see like how the brands move in a direction toward their retros. So I always, for purists, you always look for, okay, well, in this next retro that comes out, what is going to be the many factors in which they produce the retro that is going to look like the original. So it's always changed over time, whether it be like every, I don't know, say like a retro of the same colorway, model and colorway come out every 5 to 7 years or something like that. So you always look towards, okay, what was the past model like, or what was the past colorway like, and you want to see like, has the brand gotten it right, or like, why are they changing it this way? So then you have to really start to think back and be like, well, maybe they didn't have those material choices at this time to be able to get back to what it once was, or are they creating a retro to make it better than the last? So I always see that as a fascinating point where every time they retro something, you want to see if they're improving the product or they're bringing it back. So I think in a way, they try and give us a balance of that where they want to be able to better the product as it was before. Um, but I also think that there was a period in Jordan Brand's retro lineage that they went cheap. And I mean, they can probably attest to that too. And there's a period in there where either midsole paint like chipped away or like they use cheap leathers. But I would say like now like they're getting better as far as retroing their shoes. They're using better quality leathers. Uh, they're getting the shapes a little bit better, but it's still not quite there. So I think I almost think that's like they're trying to tease it in a sense where they try and appease to the OG guys to try and wheel them back in. Um, but it's like there, but it's not there. And there's a lot of different factors that, play into it. As I mentioned before, whether it be like, the original materials that were used then, that can be used today. Perhaps the factory that they got, like the different types of leathers that they use or materials are not available, you know, in today's I guess retro landscape. So again, there's like a lot of factors that play into the retro game. But I always just think it's a really fascinating thing to see like the the way that they go about it.
I was going to ask you that as somebody that's just kind of beautifully put up this monologue about, okay, this is what we would expect our retros, but this is kind of the evolution of it or the de-evolution of it in a sense. Speaking just for yourself, what do you think is that ideal sweet spot? And if that's that $1 billion question that Nike's just kind of hanging on, like, how do you answer that? Because you've just kind of put this case out there that as a retro hunter or a retro collector, I'm looking for this, this, and this, but I also have to kind of adjust for whatever societal effects there are that are currently compromising the shoe market or accentuating it. So, what is that sweet spot for you that you're like, you know what? This is it. This is the inflection point that I would say this is what Nike or Jordan has to do going forward.
So I always feel like there are so in terms of the original, I always think that there is always room for improvement when you're talking about retooling a shoe or uh, re-retroing the shoe. I would say that the brand definitely wants to be able to better their product. For example, let's talk about the Kobe's. With their Protro model, where they want to be able to create a shoe in Kobe's sense, where they want to elevate the original product, whether that be um, changing out like the air units in it or uh, putting them in different areas, either in the heel or the forefoot, or making the bags bigger or whatnot. So I almost think, in a sense, that Jordan will probably move into that direction. But I think for me, like, I always look at it as, well, how can they take the original shoe, still make it look the same, but make it better? So I feel like Kobe and Nike, in a sense, when they when it was at that time of that meeting that they were talking about, okay, well, when is Kobe gonna retro his shoes? That's probably at the point where, okay, well, let's make them look the same. They're retro, but let's make them better performing sneakers, or, better than the original. So, hopefully Jordan will take that approach and move it forward with their shoes. Like, I would love to see like an Air Jordan 1 that has like a wedge Nike Air in the heel to be a zoom unit all throughout the whole bottom. So while making it still look like the original Air Jordan 1. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm optimistic, and that's always one of the things that you're always excited about. Like, what is the next thing that they're going to create that will be able to, showcase what their brand's going to be really about.
It's kind of interesting because they have done like various versions of that, right? Like the alpha ones back in the day, and like, but they've deliberately kept it from looking original for so long. And then the Kobe line comes along, and I actually wanted to ask you this, Robbie, because you're like a huge Kobe fan and a huge LeBron kind of collector. How does that like affect your thought on purchasing the shoes? Do like would that change your opinion on like the Jordan side? Obviously, you're into all this stuff, but like you know, I look at it personally, and I look at the Kobe's and think, look, the Kobe 4, 5, and 6 are still shoes that I would happily play in. At my old age, I'll go roll my ankle in those any day of the week. But like the rest of them, right? Like LeBron 7, LeBron 8, like I'm gonna appreciate the Air Max cushioning. Like I'm in my 40s, like it's gonna be nice and cush, but I'm probably not gonna play in them to the same extent. They didn't really do anything different with them to bring these back, other than like reintroducing some great colorways. But then like there is an interesting piece to that where like I almost feel like all these collectors and all these fans expect or want or expect differently. And like just again, like you're one of those people that like has a personal connection to each of these individually, Robbie. But like, how do you feel about that whole concept of a pro show versus a retro?
Well, what's funny about it is that um, a customer a very long time ago got me this bootleg eBay photo with MJ, LeBron, and Kobe on it, and it proudly sits on my refrigerator. So that sums up how much I like all three of them. It truly is the holy trinity of like shoes for me. But to the couple points there, I don't think Jordan's ever gonna have a premium tech shoe in a retro because they're always going to want to sell premium tech shoes, comma, they're always going to sell retros. So why spend the R&D when I think all four of us can attest to wishing for a Zoom Air unit? I tell everybody I put insoles, I put Dr. Scholl's and Svenko's in my Jordan 1s because they're awful to wear. So there's a whole like ecosystem, I think, to like not putting new tech in retros because you can keep selling new shoes, you can keep selling the Jordan line as a new tech model, you know, 31 and pretty much every 2009. You don't love it, but they're still thinking tech forward at that point, even to now. You can also sell entry level Team Jordans with that same newer tech without having to go redo all the work to redo a retro with all those same new techs. So you get like three different avenues. You get the retro, the entry level basketball, and then the signature Jordan line with the peak performance, numbered, all the bells and whistles. So I don't think that's ever going to happen the way Kobe chose to have that performance mentality with his retros coming back. It's interesting to hear these stories of him wanting to have his own shoe brand that's more tech driven, but it also plays into what he's always wanted from the jump, and kind of why, if you want to go all the way back, why he left Adidas, right? The shoes were, I mean, they're clunkers. I mean, they're cool, but they're clunkers. So it's like he always sought what's the best thing for performance to help me be a better basketball player. So anytime his shoe comes back out, it kind of has to keep that same mentality. It has to keep improving itself when possible. But there's Kobe collectors like myself and this Los Angelinos and this Laker Nation who just want Kobe stuff to look like the way it looked when he played. So he benefited from his era of his shoes already being tech driven. It's not really all that hard to put a drop in. You can even get really lazy. You can put a drop in insole with a zoom unit in the drop in. You can do something really easy. He has many options. You can improve fly wire on on like the I would consider the Hyperdunk a Kobe shoe, but you can just do so many things that just little tweaks to already technically proficient shoes. And then the last part of that is like the LeBrons, like these eights. This is I've had every version of the LeBron 8, the postseason, the V2, the low, the original, and this is the original LeBron 8 in all its glory. Like it has the same crappy fly wire. It's all the way it was back in 2011, I believe. So you don't have to update the tech in this because it's a viable basketball option now. It really is. I mean, is it the lightest shoe? No. Is it, um, you know, does it have, Zoom Air within the Air Max? Is it sectioned off Air Max? No. It's just like a Heritage Air Max bag like the Air Max 2010 had. Every shoe from like Nike from like 2009, if you had Air Max from 2009 to like 12, it had this Heritage bag. So it's completely proficient and viable, but you're never going to have to do anything new to that because LeBron James is the icon. So when this shoe retros again in 15 years, the people that never saw LeBron play are still going to say, "Oh, damn, that's the new LeBron retro." And I can still go play in it right now and not sweat my feet out. Go through two pairs of socks like you're going to go in a Jordan 9. I think of those olives, those gorgeous olives. Like those things are sweat factories. You're going to go wear the biggest, puddliest socks ever. And so, yeah, that's my point. LeBron will never have to. Kobe's doing it because he wanted it. And Jordan will never do it because the money's too good.
I mean, that makes me wonder
I
if.
will argue though.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I will argue though that if Jordan Brand did want to do something like that, they'd have to start out limited first. So if they were going to put out something with a tech-driven retro, they're gonna have to put something that's limited to see and appease the fans and the nostalgia of it all, to see if it will work. So you think back to like the Air Jordan 8, with retros above the 15, they started messing with giving us Jordan 18s, um, the 17, I think the trophy rooms or whatever.
Hmm.
And then the 16s, I think was Soulfly or something like that. I don't know. I'm not like, I can't think back too far. I gotta Google stuff sometimes. But um, yeah, I would say like, some of that stuff like has to be limited if they were going to put a tech-driven retro out into the market just to see like if it would work. If not, then they can continue making the same type of retros that they can continue doing, and I will be right there trying to compare each and every single one of them.
Nick, if I may, Marvin, what do you make of the 11 Adapt then? Do you think that is kind of a proof of concept of, hey, let's try this out. If it works, we look like geniuses. And if it doesn't, oh, it was just a snapshot in time. And we just wanted to showcase that we're good business partners to Nike and Nike technology.
Yeah, I think with the Adapt 11, I didn't go for those, but I think it's more of so of a prop than it is anything of a regular retro that's going to be put out. Like you have the technology to put out something like that, and it being one of the first Jordans to do it. I'm not sure what the reception was with the general public on the Adapt 11, but I just don't see myself or any basketball player really playing in them, at least long term. It would be something that, like, back then, Swaggy P would wear like a Yeezy on court, and it'd just be like a shock factor type thing. Oh, well, he's playing in the Adapt 11. But yeah, so how is that going to work long time? Robbie had just pointed out, as far as like the LeBron that he was showing earlier, that's something that you can wear, after multiple games. But with something as heavy tech driven as the Adapt 11, I don't think it's going to last long term, at least not on court.
So I'm gonna give it back to Nick. But so the Adapt 11 is like a concept car, I think. So the Adapt BB is the released Audi e-tron, or whatever it was called. And then there's the concept version, which is the 11 BB, which you can see it, you can buy. You can, not a direct comparison, but it's not. It has the tech, but it's not made to perform like that. So the car.
Yeah, I mean that's. I'm glad you brought up the adapts because that's one of the things that I wanted to actually talk a little bit more about in this conversation. But also like going back to what Robbie was talking about, you know, Michael, Kobe, and LeBron and the difference between the three and their retros. I'm really fascinated by the NBA players wanting to play in retro product, and there's there's a few different ways I want to talk about that, but like basically, you know, I've been on both sides of that argument to say that like look, the NBA is not the driver of sales, right? Like 100% the NBA is not driving sales of a lot of product. Like it used to be, right? We all came into this because of basketball. Maybe a little bit for some of us because of skateboarding that was also looking at basketball, right? Like when I was a kid, like we went from skateboarding to playing basketball in the same shoes. Whether like that
Shout
was,
out Bones.
I mean, I can't reach my Jordan 9 originals, but like that shoe for me was like everything, right? Because it was the first pair that I bought and it was all that I had. So I did everything in it. But I think that, that's an interesting piece to this, that we have all these guys that are, almost like making names for themselves based on what they carry to the game. And, you know, it's a fascinating thing. I'm one of those people like the more eyes and energy that come to the sneaker world, the happier I am, right? Like ultimately, I just look at it as like, look, an Adapt 11 is not for me. But if it gets headlines and a bunch of people want to go after it, that means that Nike's going to have more money to make the products that I'm looking forward to Marvin breaking down in 2022 and 2023 to compare, you know, like what does that 30-year retro of the Jordan 9 look like? The money comes from all these like facets of the business. And I kind of feel like I'm a little bit removed from like the collector's aspect in my mind when I talk about that. But like I think that there's a really weird like trend right now for the players to be looking at retro product because they need to stand out, right? Which means they have to diversify what Nike's just going to straight up offer them. Some of the guys will get a Kobe PE colorway. Some of the guys might even get, team shoes. Some of the guys might get Jordan PEs. But there's, I don't know, let's say 100, 150 dudes playing in the league, and roughly 90% of them want to wear a unique shoe every day, every game, and half of them want to carry a second shoe into the gym.
Well,
So it's a really weird time where the brands have to be, and we're going to generally speak about Nike and Jordan, but all the brands have to kind of be aware of like, hey, this is kind of interesting, right? Like there's a opportunity to have these guys carrying retro product and playing in performance, but that's a whole different mindset than what, like, Marvin, you were talking about Jordan Brand, or Robbie, you were talking about, right? Where Jordan Brand is like almost still trying to do these two worlds, but then they don't, like I think like a lot of people probably fall into that category of like, just give us Zoom Air in a Jordan 4 or a Jordan 3 and make it look the same. Give us a little more cushion, and like this is a casual shoe, but we would play in this if it had just a little bit here and there, right? And it's kind of a little bit of like part of the conversation we had with the wear testers guys around this topic a little bit in a recent episode, but I really think that there's Robbie nailed it with the comparison of the three kind of cornerstones of how we approach sneakers, and whether that's from the brands or from as a consumer. But at what point does the brand have to react to the players doing what they want to do, right? Because the reason that Jordans became cool is because of MJ. The reasons that Kobe became performance is because of Kobe. If LeBron is always going to be looking to wear retro products on the court once in a while, then what does that look like when you're trying to sell a $250, you know, like pinnacle signature sneaker for Nike basketball, because it's contradicting, the message that you're telling, the 16, 17-year-old kid that's just like kind of fresh into this as a fan, as a baller or whatever that is. And how will they ever be able to distinguish between those, right? Like, will LeBron eventually say, look, Bronny's not going to play in my old tech LeBron 8. We need a new tech LeBron 8 for him before I retire, right? Like, that seems like a legitimate conversation that could happen between LeBron and Nike basketball guys, right? But I don't know. Like, I'm just going to, I guess, throw it to you guys and see what you think about that, because I feel like there's just this, it's almost like LeBron at some point, like he's wearing new stuff too, right? Like, just saw his, birthday shoes, right? He's got bright pink 18s or whatever, and it's like that's a beautiful shoe. But then if you're pushing the retro the same day that you wear this crazy shoe, are you, like, there's only so many of us that are willing to go the extra mile and dig in and find out what he was wearing on that day and go back, right? Like, I think, like, there's, like, looking at what you've done over the years, Marvin, and my career path with all this stuff, it's like, there's just not a lot of people that want to just obsess over this the way we do. And if people don't obsess over it, to say, like, what's it look like 10 years from now when the conversation is, do we retro the 18 birthday, or do we just retro the Lakers 8 again? Like, that's a weird kind of conundrum that I think the brand will be in.
I'll alley oop it to Marvin, but like when you guys were growing up, because you two are older than Rowett and I, like the shoes were like tertiary. So like you have the player, but then probably the cards were the second most important thing you wanted, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna go try to get this MJ card or this penny card, than 5 colorways of the penny one. I mean, just realistically, you probably have a card or 2 cards before you have 10 pairs of one shoe or a line.
Yeah,
At that
magazine
point,
covers and stuff like that. Yeah, that's kind of how it was for me.
now it's like the shoes are their own story. There's so much social and everything behind it. So like you'll never have to bring the LeBron. I mean, unless you really want to. The LeBron 8 has already come out in every other kind of version. The postseason, the V2, the low. So if you do want a more tech-driven version, they already did it. They can just bring that one back and make that money again. So I don't think you'll ever have to have a full facelift with the LeBron line retros like you'll have to have, or if you choose to have, with Michael. I
Yeah,
passed the rock.
what's hard is that the older guys like us are wanting to go back and getting stuff that we couldn't obtain when we were younger. So that's why retro has been such a craze nowadays, is that people can afford it now that they're older, they have jobs, they can get them. But there is a
Preach.
really grand balancing act that the brand has to do in order to appease both the kids that may want to play in the new stuff, but they also want to understand what this old stuff was about. And then you have the old guys that are like, well, I just want what was I couldn't get then that I can try and get now. So retro has really become a really big business to the brands. So I can remember back then, and Nick, you may know, is that they didn't come out with so many colorways back then. You had like the Jordan 7, and it only came out like in what, 4 or 5 colors or something. Now we have how many
Yeah.
colors that come out in a year? Like,
90 in 2012, 2020.
yeah,
90.
you know what I mean? So um, it's really hard. It's a really hard balancing act for the brands to be able to appease both sides of the spectrum. So I don't know what your views are on that, but yeah, I'll pass the rock to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really kind of fascinating challenge for the brands, right? Because, you know, let me preface this by saying, like, I've worked, for and with and alongside a lot of these companies for the last 12, 13 years. And I understand that, like, in the grand scheme of things, sneakerheads don't matter. Like, I'm not saying that they don't matter at all, but, like, bottom line, dollar for dollar, we are very, like, we make
All,
very
all money
little.
is created equal, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, right. And that's always been a challenge, right? When I worked at Finish Line, it's really tough because I'm trying to bring people on that are excited about sneakers. I'm trying to, work with different people and hire people and, get people excited about sneakers. But at the end of the day, I just need you to buy an extra pair of socks so we can hit our numbers, right? Like, that's the the shitty situation about the world of sneakers, and love it or hate it, like, it's the Nike Monarch, right? Air Monarch. It's like, you know, that shoe is the 60 $55, get it at I was going to say Mervin's, but they're out of business for like a decade. But if you know Mervin's, you
Oh,
know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I feel like the Air Monarch was made for that, like, Kohl's type of retailer, because a majority of people go into that store and buy Nikes. They don't care what the shoe is. They just go in, they say, this is the one on sale, and it's got a swoosh on it. I've always loved an all black shoe with a white logo or an all white shoe with a navy logo. Those two colorways outsell everything for all these retailers, for all these brands, no matter what the case is, right? And we get excited about the things that differentiate. Robbie, before we started recording, was talking about the details on the LeBron 8. Some of the things that I forgot about, right? Like the bigger perforations and having eight bigger perforated holes on the sides. And, like, those details, for people that get really passionate about it, are amazing, right? We get so excited about the little things like that because it's what we get to look at and say, this is what makes this special, and this is what makes this something that only our peers and community of sneakerheads has gotten massive compared to what it was. I just think back to, like, Soul Collector days, right? Like, we thought we had a massive audience of, hitting like 200,000 members on the forums. We probably never had near that active at the same time, but, like, that was like a very small percentage of the entire globe of people that bought sneakers. But we felt so connected because we could talk about those crazy little details that, like, we show it to our parents and they're like, yeah, great, another pair of shoes. Why you keep buying those? Quit buying them. Go get a better job. Like, go buy a house, go buy
You
a
already
second
got a
house,
black
rent it
pair.
out. Shouldn't you be a doctor or a lawyer by now? Like, that's kind of the thing that we got excited about. And I wonder how you're going to recreate that now, because we're in this time where, like Robbie said, if there's all these variations of the shoes, right? Like, we've gotten to the point where there's a lot of shoes available. If you want a retro, you can buy, 90. You can basically buy two retros a week the entire year. That's insane, right? And, like you said, I don't know if it was before we were recorded or not, but, like, you got to pick and choose your battles and where you actually want to say, this is going to be something I pick up. And inevitably, at least in my experience in meeting you guys and everybody that I've met in the sneaker space, we always put off a lot of those purchases too, because we're like, it's not a now purchase. It's a, I'll pick that up when the price drops later, or I'll pick that up when the timing is better for me, or, it'll be on the, like, the back of the mind list in case I come across it at a convenient price or somebody needs to unload it. And we don't have a way to do that with new product. At least I don't think so. Like, you brought up Swaggy P, and, I immediately thought of Gilbert Arenas being like the decade before, of, like, just wearing all this random stuff. Kobe's year, we've got these questions dropping, and, from Kobe's, free agency year. All of those little things just don't really happen the same way, because you've got guys, at least on the court, that are just trying to wow you with what they have access to, right? This is not shots at anybody, but, like, PJ Tucker being like the face of the sneaker world for NBA fans is a perfect example of this. you know, he wears shoes that are not his size. And I respect that because I would have done the same thing when I was younger. And, I have plenty of shoes that are maybe a half size, maybe a full size if I was really like needed to have it kind of shoe, but I wouldn't play in them. And that's a really interesting thing because you're now exposing the masses to all these very specific details in the big, of sneakers as a collectible, as a subculture, as a community, whatever you want to call it. But there's no way for those stories to resonate with anybody outside of like, oh, PJ Tucker wore these and I saw it on Instagram. And because we see that times 50 or 100 guys every week, I mean, I can't even keep up with what all the players wear at this point because I see pictures of them coming in the tunnel, leaving the tunnel, on the court, first half, second half. The beauty of what Marvin was saying about like the Jordan 7s and only having a handful of colorways is that you really got to see when Michael wore something special, right? Like if you were paying attention or if if you had friends that were paying attention, you literally looked at it and were like, is there something different about that? Like, oh, like, I mean, Russ Bengtson and I talk about this a lot with like, just Michael wearing white laces in the fives was like just such an anomaly compared to the rest of the league at the time, right? One, him wearing black shoes was, an anomaly, right? Compared to a lot of the guys. Everybody's wearing white still in the late 80s and early 90s and is very, like that's what made the Jordans cool though, right? They were so far and beyond what we expected to see from a sneaker. Yeah, and obviously the sneaker world and Nike basketball kind of followed suit and carried that whole thought process and blew it up to the way we are now. But I just don't see ways for people to be excited about these. I don't know what the best way to put it, micro stories along the way, right? Because we're already in this very like you know I don't know what you call it, like focused interest group of what we like, right? With being sneaker guys. And yes, that's gotten bigger, but it's still relatively small compared to the general consumer, right? The general consumer sees a red and black shoe. The perfect example. The general consumer sees a Dub Zero and thinks, "Oh, that's those Jordans that Michael wore back in the day," and they buy the Bulls colorway of the Dub Zero or the Bulls colorway of a Flight 9 or like any of those offshoot Jordan shoes that we would look at and think it's never going to really be a priority. I might like one or two colors here and there, and I might pick up something if there's a good story or if it's cheap enough. But like, we never will look at those shoes the same way we look at an actual Jordan Retro, because of our, you know, I guess relationship and fandom for Michael, right, and for the shoes themselves. So that's kind of a piece that I think is going to be really challenging for the brands as they move forward from this. It's like you have an incredible amount of energy. You have less time to tell important stories because everybody just swipes right past, right? At least, at least with, I mean, I feel like I'm harking back to Soul Collector days, but at least when you did something that put a shoe on the cover of Soul Collector or even a shoe on the cover of an East Bay catalog, you had something very tangible that got passed around, and the story was carried around the circle of people that became the stories that we tell to people now. That right now, in my opinion, feels like a like it feels like us complaining about not hitting on sneakers app. Like it feels like there's very little of that social, the community aspect of carrying those stories. And as much as I love working in the business, I really do like have a concern for the people that are going to try to carry those stories on, because ultimately it's going to be really difficult to try to revisit these things. We see I don't want to point any fingers or name any names, but recently I saw somebody kind of coming back at one of the retailers because of them. So what I did at Finish Line was I tried to bring in more of the outlier things, right? Like in a episode with Russ Bingston that will be out right around this time, I talk about how, you know, we carried the torch through those magazines, through the conversations, and it wasn't just basketball, right? It was hip hop, it was, you know, it was camping out, it was like all these like just much deeper level and much more intricate stories. The same way that we look at a shoe and look at those perforations and like, you know, like I mean, just think about how crazy that is. If you handed somebody a sneaker in the middle of, you know, let's say we didn't have, you know, a pandemic going on, but if you're in a Macy's and you hand somebody a sneaker, there's very few people in that store that are going to look at the store and go, "Oh, it's crazy. This one little perforation's bigger compared to the rest." But like we all know people that we would hand those shoes to that would be like, "God, I remember that little." I mean, you know, like the alpha, you know, alpha. Oh, I'm drawing a blank. The five dots on all the alpha line from Nike basketball, right? I forget
Mm-hmm.
what that was called, but like those types of things are those like very deep stories, and they're not connected to there's product, there's
Battlegrounds.
players, and there's the community story of it. And now I don't think that we have that anymore. And this is all part of the evolution, right? Like we'll still be here probably talking about this in 10 years going, yeah, this is crazy. This is how this worked. And it'll be some other weird thing. But like to me, what is that? Like how do, you know, how does the guy that's just buying to resell, or the, you know, like paying $500 for this Adapt 11, connect that story with people when there's fewer people getting the shoe, fewer people actually talking about the shoe, and less importance to, like, I'd say like sports culture, hip hop culture, global, you know, entertainment type stuff, other than maybe a celebrity wearing it, right? Like
I'll
that's the only thing I can think of.
Man, it's Nike Battlegrounds is the five dots
Yeah,
you
yeah,
were
yeah,
you were
yeah.
thinking of. But Marvin's YouTube channel is keeping the conversations alive. We are currently keeping these conversations alive. And all jokes aside, we really are. And I hope we're talking about this 10 years from now, because I think obviously Prince dead. That's not a news flash. But brands
Ironic.
more and more are going to realize the value in podcasts like this, because we can engage and initiate those stories still, and we will continue to. So Marvin's dedicated work, you brought up people who don't want to go through the work of cataloging, or doing the legwork of having each and every of a 2001 retro, 2002, etc. I'm one of those people who don't want to ever go through that work. So his work will help keep that alive. So it's like we, the four of us and others, will keep those stories going, because there's never going to be the good old print days. There's not even really, I mean, Kim Kardashian breaking the internet with her butt and champagne. That's like the last magazine cover, and credit to, I can't stand that woman, but credit to her. It's a I don't know what magazine it was, but I know it was a magazine cover. Like that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore. So it's going to be the podcasts. It's going to be the YouTube videos. It's going to be us keeping it alive.
So I like that because now I can tell people, hey, I'm in the modern day slam. So I am the new Russ or I am the new Lang Whitaker. So I'll gladly add my LinkedIn profile to that.
Scoop.
But I think one thing that you had mentioned, Nick, that I kind of want to go back on is so much of being a sneakerhead right now is being in an echo chamber where you throw an opinion out knowing that everybody else is going to agree with it. And then you feel more justified to perpetuate that narrative. And it's also been one of those things where when you're looking at it, I don't even understand how people get organic ideas anymore because it just seems like, okay, I'm just taking this idea that the kid up the street who I respect, he has this opinion and I'm going to go for it. And I use the example of PJ Tucker because you guys had also previously brought him up. I always look at things more from a basketball lens than a sneaker lens. And that's because I'm just wired a little bit differently, I guess, in this regard. But if I'm listening to, let's say, The Low Post, which is probably the modern day Sports Illustrated from a basketball perspective, he's going to talk about PJ Tucker being a gritty four who's undersized but tough. But compare and contrast that with whatever the modern day equivalent of Complex Magazine is, probably a Complex podcast. They are more attuned to him being this sneaker demigod in a sense because He has his own colorway for a Kobe 5. He may never get his own signature line, but because he has that heat, so to speak, and he's got that Santa's, whatchamacallit, the Santa carrying sack of shoes, because you are kind of thirsting to see, okay, what is he going to wear next? What does that relate to that sneaker's significance and I guess sneaker history? Shameless plug there. It's going to be really interesting. And one other thing is the fact that for us, you talk about the fact that there was a lot of overlap, right? You have a basketball sneaker and a hip hop connection to these shoes or these magazines. But now, as everybody's getting that access to make something more readily apparent by having a phone like this, it seems that we're almost drifting further apart. And you had these connected stories that are now their own genre. So, a kid that may have been interested in hip hop and basketball and sneakers in 2002 is now almost isolated to think I'm just a music guy now. I just care about hip hop, or I'm just a sneaker guy. I don't really care what the significance is in terms of who the player is on the sneaker. I just know I have to have this sneaker for whatever reason. So it's just a lot of different contrasting ideas, but I think everybody brings up a good point. This thing is ever evolving, and just when we think we've got a good handle of it, it completely flips on us. And it's one of those things that if somebody writes the modern day equivalent of sole provider, this era to me is going to be characterized as the reseller era. And that lack of human connection behind the sneakers is almost a metaphor for the lack of human communication some people talk about because of the fact that people say, oh, we're overly reliant on technology. And I think resellers kind of represent that because they are here to do one thing and one thing only, which is pick up these sneakers and then flip them and try to get as much profit as they can so they can buy their next thing. And it's weird how it's almost a systematic representation of what we're going through. But like I said, you guys have all articulated this in a way that makes it easier for people that tend to overthink these things like I do. So I thank you for that.
I mean, I think it makes some great points, and I think like just to like toss this to you, Marvin. Or before I toss it to you, I am not, you know, denying that people will come up with their own stories, right? Like that's the beauty of what these things are to me, right? Like I don't care if I hand you a Jordan 1 and you are let's say you're Marvin and you're like this I remember seeing MJ wear this at the Garden in 94 and thought, "Holy, like how is he doing this?" Or if you're the kid that was like that got the $30 pair in '85 and went and shredded everywhere you could possibly shred on your skateboard, or if you were the kid that just wanted to line up for off-white ones and hang out with your friends for 18 hours in the cold because it was a cool way for you to go hang out with your friends, pandemic aside. I think those stories are incredibly awesome, and I love that sneakers can just be a thing that like you could literally hand to somebody and say, "Tell me about this." It's completely different, but yet we all could relate to the element of like what that shoe represents to us. But to kind of like hand this off to you, Marvin, with all of these kind of facets, all of this thinking, and without like trying to be overly nostalgic, how do you see like this year, being a from a collector standpoint or from like the opportunities for the brand to tell stories, and how would you prioritize them, or suggest Nike Jordan brands prioritize those stories, because obviously we're getting to the point where the catalog is massive, 30 years back, 25 years back, 20 years back. Now we've got retro on retro on retro, so you're compounding the potential stories that you can go chase the same way from a collector standpoint, but also from like, I guess just your personal opinion on what's important, and how the brand kind of brings that stuff back to light.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here with you guys just have discussed each of you in the past couple of minutes here, but um I think what Road had brought up is that as connected as we are, we're still very much disconnected. So I think the narrative has to go back to the brands, and they have to be able to control the storytelling. There's Michael Jordan. He's an icon, a legend. Still living, still able to tell some stories, as you guys knew with The Last Dance. So a lot of people were home for that. Obviously we're living in the COVID era. March, April, nobody was doing anything. So I think this was a great opportunity for MJ and ESPN Films, Netflix, whatnot, to be able to share that story with everyone across the globe. And I think at that moment in time, people were able to relate or learn something new that they didn't already know, or even some of the older guys know what was happening at that point in time as an adult now to understand, oh, okay, well, that situation I understand now because, I didn't at the time. But I think, that type of storytelling there is something that the brand should really take and try and immerse into, I don't know, I would say like a new shoe. So say like, okay, so the 36 is probably done already. They're working on the 37. Um, Maybe the 38. Okay, so at the time, the Jordan 20 was a shoe that I absolutely loved and other people absolutely hated. It could either be the strap, the laser printing on the shoe at that, but I thought it told a wonderful story. And shout out to Mark Smith for being able to do that along with Tinker Hatfield and collaborating for that game shoe. But there's little things in that shoe that uh, a lot of stories that were told, and they put out some beautiful commercials with, "Let Your Game Speak." I don't know if you guys remember that commercial, or just like really storytelling MJ's game. So, or even like on the shoe they have like uh POP for pop, whether, and like you have to look at the actual shoe to understand like what each icon meant. And even now, like I go back and I still have to like think about like, if you're really into this stuff and you're really passionate about like the lineage of Jordan Brand, like you look at that shoe and it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of things going on that draws inspiration from MJ's life. Just stuff like that. Like I feel like storytelling in a sense is misled, where everyone now is thinking about reselling a shoe because there's so many shoes that are coming out. It's always about like, okay, well, I didn't get that shoe today. There's always next week to get something new, and I feel like people don't have a grasp of the true storytelling of of a sneaker, and they don't put themselves into the shoe as much as like I personally would love to see. Or I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much about it, but I just feel like the attachment there is not. It's always about the next shoe, and obviously it's a brand. They're there to make money. So it's either the brand relies on what I do as far as YouTubing this stuff or putting stories out on Instagram and sharing it with the world, and hoping people embrace it or not. It is what it is. It's really hard to determine the direction that the brands will end up taking, but who knows? It'll probably change again in 5 years.
Yeah. I because you brought up the Last Dance, I wanted to read something real quick because I had hit up, if you're in our Discord, you know who Brighton is. He's young cat that is super passionate about sneakers, and I actually hit him up uh, yesterday, the day before, to ask him about the Last Dance. As somebody who never got to watch Jordan, is still a teenager, and I just thought his response was really fascinating. So he said, for me, watching The Last Dance was probably a different experience than most of you guys because I'm younger and wasn't growing up watching this all unfold. It was really cool for me to kind of experience Mike's career in a sense and not just highlights. It helped me really see why he is seen as the GOAT and what kind of impact this mythical man's sneakers must have made in the sports world. It made me think how amazing it is that this man, who was the best athlete in the world, got paired with the Air Jordan 1, one of the best shoes in the world, and the shoe that got me into sneakers. The documentary in a whole was a little jumbled in my opinion, but I didn't care too much because I was just happy to experience every part of it and learn as much as I could. And so if you're in the Discord, you've probably either seen Brighton or talked to him on there. And one of the things that I really was impressed when he joined was that here he is, somebody that has really no real reason to go back and understand these stories, but like I love that because maybe it's because like that was me at 17, 18, trying to understand what made these skateboarders and these, baseball players and basketball players the gods of their era. But like that I kind of relate that to what you said, because the storytelling aspects of all of these shoe designs. I'm a big fan of the 20 as well, and storytelling aspect that was a part of that really captured my attention at the time in a way that was like, wow, this is really a celebration of 20 years of us hearing these little tidbits. And one thing that I really liked about The Last Dance is that it got this new generation an opportunity to like understand, you know, not just the like crazy uncle saying, "Here's a pair of Jordans. You'll never believe why these are great," but like literally watch it come from the man himself talking trash about the Detroit Pistons, or whatever those moments within The Last Dance that I resonated with, or whoever, whatever it is for each individual. But like the opportunity for a new generation to kind of like obviously get reintroduced to what this did for, everyone our age, 10, 20 years older than that teenage kid right now. And it's it's almost like reaffirming what I was, kind of thinking about as you were talking about that. The brands the brands need, so much more help from guys like you, Marvin, guys like, Rowett, Robbie, myself, that, you know, they're hiring people, and the more we go, the more we bring in people that have that passion. But there's so much opportunity to, like you said, the pop, like, or just like Mark Smith and the lasering. I mean, that in itself as a sneaker guy is like an era, man. Like that was like most people right now probably have no clue, because that was just perfectly outside of the window of the attention that came from the resale market in like the early, or 2011, 2012, like blowing up to a mainstream level. Plus it also was like, if you weren't on the forums before the blogs, you didn't see a whole lot of lasering. Like you saw the laser fours, you saw a few here and there, but like there was a lot of lasering being done, and like that in itself, and Mark Smith being the proponent of that, and the advocate for that uniqueness and the individuality that they could create out of lasering products all across the board, right? I mean, I just, it's totally random, but like a couple weeks ago I was on eBay looking at stuff, and I came across uh, like a, I forget if it was a bag or a backpack that had like almost like the 20, like the strap on the 20 with all the lasering, like that had all the details on it, and it was almost like laser, kind of details on a bag. And you know I guess just me not thinking about all the other pieces to sneakers that come every year with that. It was like, wow, this is crazy. I didn't even think about it. And then that led me down the whole path of like, what else am I forgetting about? Like, like all the times that Nike SB did elephant print belts, like all the stuff that just like, they're still pulling from all these individual pieces of the Jordan story and the Jordan lineage to represent to a different consumer, but also the same consumer, the same interest, right? And it's it's really kind of crazy to hear somebody, like from Brighton, who's a full generation behind myself, and like to think of like how he's looking at this in the same way, and brought that level of excitement to Jordans, right? And I think that happened I mean, I know that happened on a massive scale because of The Last Dance. And it was super dope to me to see that, kind of reinvigorate the passion for what this was. But I also think that there was huge missed opportunities. Like I was just talking to my friend Joe today about the missed opportunities for the other brands that were involved in some of these storylines throughout. Were like, how come General Mills didn't release a retro Wheaties box for The Last Dance? I mean, you knew the movie, you knew the documentary was coming. I still eat Wheaties occasionally. I would absolutely have gone and bought, 2 or 3 boxes of a retro, Flight Club type Jordan box, right? Just because I don't know if I would keep it and save it the way I would have, 30 years ago, but it's that those types of things where we see it with the Gatorade stuff, we see it with kind of like, I guess other ways where they're trying to bring in more relevant stories, PlayStation stuff, right? PS5s and all these shoes that have come out with like the PG line or whatever. But like I almost feel like, taking your thoughts there a little bit further, it's almost like it needs to come back in, right? It needs to come back into really become more focused and more poignant with those stories in order to make sure that people actually you know, like I don't know, get the passion and catch the I don't know, I don't want to call it a disease, but it's basically like the catch the
The bug.
drug, right? that we all caught. So I don't know. I'm gonna stop
So I
rambling
feel
and
like
let you guys talk.
I'll, I'll mention that they can easily do this if they just brought the retro cards back. You know what I mean? Like that type of packaging type thing where they just include something, uh, a little blurb about something.
Thanks, man. I wanted to actually kind of, I guess, throw this to Robbie because bringing up the retro cards is a great example of, I think, the opportunity to, you know story tell without it being integrated into the shoes, but also retell stories. And one of the things that Robbie mentioned on one of his recent lives, I think on our Instagram, was about the Air Max 90 and how, it came with all this, like, with all the nostalgia that we've kind of been craving in a sense, right? Even if we didn't really know that we were craving it, but like the Air Max 90 in 2020 is, you know, essentially like the Radiant Red, Infrared, and all the other Air Max 3s became like this, like a kind of an anomaly for the sneaker world, right? Because not only were they massively produced, they were actually really well made, and like Robbie is not an Air Max guy normally, but ended up, picking up a handful of them. But like that to me, so like I guess like I'm gonna toss this to you, Robbie, but like it affected you with the Air Max 90. Do you think that it, the return of retro cards in some form, or all the little things that came with the Jordans throughout the way? I think of the Jordan 20 had the mesh bags and the little disc, circle cardboard disc thing of all the details. How much of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff matters to you, and how much of that stuff can be applied to, say, the LeBron lineage or the Kobe lineage? Because there's I know it wasn't there the first time in the same way that it was for Jordans, but we're also talking, retro cards. We're talking about like the retro product, right? That's what helped us kind of like in an era without social media go back and think, damn, I need to get all these other colorways, right? It reminds me of like a Master P album back in the 90s, right? Where you like flip it open and you're like, oh shit, here's the next 12 CDs I got to buy.
No, Nick, I think you're tripping because I think you brought up the nostalgia part of the Air Max 90 in your
Oh,
video.
damn.
I think it was you,
You had
because
the
I'm not
purple
gonna
Air
lie.
Maxes. That's what I was watching. I remember watching you pull out the purple ones, the ones that I
Yeah,
didn't get.
I'm not gonna lie. So it's like I have really flat feet, so it's cool that they come with the little wedge pieces in the Air Max 90. But I hate that Air Max 90. That's what I was saying. That I hate the Air Max 90 box because it's just so little. Those retro running boxes, if you're a size 12 to 13 like Nick and I am, it doesn't fit right. Like this shoe gets smashed just putting it in the box. But retro cards are just retro cards are such a unique thing because they have no real purpose to them, but they're just fun, like fun. Like there's no purpose to them really. And I mean, to a point, you got to look back at all. Let's use the Jordan 9 retro card for example. I guess all of them up until a point. You get to see the past shoes that came from it. Cool. You got to see like on the Jordan 8 MJ, like was it like dunking in space or something on the Jordan 8 retro card, I believe. Those kind of things are cool, but when it comes to retroing new athlete product, um, it's been kind of a bummer from a packaging standpoint. Those FUN things, the fun aspects, because the LeBron 2 and 7 retros came. Well, scratch that. The 7 came back in an OG box, like the original box, but the LeBron 3 and the LeBron 1 came in orange hard. I call it the hard boxes, the hard Nike sportswear boxes. And that's kind of a bummer because the 3 originally came with one of those push boxes that the Jordan 11s come in, where you push it in and you kind of hear it fart when you push the box in. It has the double flaps on them, but it
FUN.
also, yeah, it's
Yeah.
FUN here in the FART. Um, but the 3 box had a handle, kind of like a Nintendo GameCube, the LeBron 3 on the back, and the Air Zoom Generation box was just a standard Nike box back in the day. You know, the gray and orange kind of with the stars on it, or whatever pattern. I would have loved to see those cool things. I love those early 2000s Nike basketball, those non-discrete. You could have a sample, you could have $1 million shoe in there, and it's a fucking gray and orange Nike box, and it's awesome. But the Kobe stuff too, like the boxes, like the Kobe 6, for example, the 6 Protro comes in the same box that the 1 Protro comes in. I don't have a 5 Protro, so I can't speak to it. But the 1 and the 6 come in the same box. The 6 originally had a box that said Phenomenon on it, had the cool print throughout it. And those are just the fun things you miss out on. But you get added performance in the Kobe's. You get great samples that I never thought I would own, like St. Vincent, St. Mary's, LeBron things. So there's trade-offs. Like, cool, I'll happily take a SVSM colorway I'm not paying thousands of dollars for, and I'll take the orange box with it if that's what you're giving me. But Jordan has always had. I mean, Jordan has been around so long. I think the most fun things about Jordan are the boxes more than the cards. Like I miss the 2010 silver. I call it like the spaceman boxes, where it's like that spacey graphite and black. Then you have the face boxes from the mid 2000s. You know, the Jordan 12 came in the nondescript Jumpman looking box that looks like a Nike box. It's just like so many. Those are the fun
Su-
things.
the suitcase, right, with Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
So
this.
the
Yes.
'Cause, I
17
mean,
and the
th-
18 coming with briefcases. No, 18 didn't come with a briefcase. 17 came with a briefcase.
People
18 just
want
had a
those
weird
back.
box.
If we're talking
Yeah.
about packages, definitely people want if the shoes didn't come back, people want at least the briefcase back.
At least the
Yep.
briefcase, but like the coolest shoes I've had this year. So the Super Mario Pumas, like that has screenshots of different Mario games on the paper, and that's just FUN, man. That's good
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep. So I got two questions and we can wrap up. First one being thinking about like the Pumas, right? The paper having those graphics. Thinking about like, somebody just recently asked me if I thought that Jordan should bring back the boxes from '94, right? It's like I think the most obvious, you know, like homage to the lineage of the shoes, right? Was the '94 boxes with the, the kind of graphics that showcase all the, elements of the shoe throughout. And I, on some level, I'm like we don't need to go down that path, but on another level, I'm like, yes, of course, like I'd put that box on the wall, next to another piece of art, because it was so important to see that. But also, it's like one of those things where, you know, does it resonate the same way with, other products or retros the second time around? Like, let's take the idea of either packaging or retro cards or any of those FUN things, but
I don't know why I did that, but that's our thing now. It's just the FUN.
I think you should copyright that, Robbie, because that could generate a lot of money for you if done properly.
but
FART
like,
too.
yeah, that was a good one. Yeah,
FART, yeah.
fart boxes. Yeah, FART boxes. Um,
You open a box, it smells like Jordan's fart.
we can't do anything serious around here. No. But so like thinking about that, could you or would it be interesting to you guys if maybe different elements of what made that important outside of Jordan, outside of Kobe, right? I'm not saying this makes it important to you, but like let's say DeMar DeRozan wore some Grinches this year. 5 to 10 years from now, do you want to see that piece of the story represented? Does it make any sense? What? How do you guys feel about that whole idea and what that could look like?
It makes sense to me if you're using DeRozan as your character study in this because he's an LA guy. He has that connection to
Mm.
Kobe. He had always those player editions of Kobe, if I'm correct. But I mean, I love your idea of packaging and the FUN, copyright Robbie. It's one of those things where, as you were going through that spiel, Nick, I can think of a pair of Nike Tiempos because I fancy myself a soccer player. I don't know if I actually am a soccer player, but there was a colorway that came out a couple years ago, which was attributed to Andrea Pirlo, and he's known as a winemaker in his spare time. And the sneaker came in a box, and when you opened the box, it had cork frilly paper on it, so it looked like a wine bottle in there. That is fun. That is something I will remember. And it's one of those things where somebody alluded to the point that print is dead, and maybe that's the literal reason why we don't have trading cards anymore in the actual thing. Because whatever the modern day equivalent of a trading card would be, I think it would get relegated to an app somewhere. And because of the fact that it's so disposable, and that's kind of the point of having these apps, you're not going to have that lifelong representation of that shoe. So if you're going to tell these stories with the print, with the packaging and whatnot, case in point, the Grinch, even the Bruce Lee, like I think Kobe's done a great job of tying his mythology to other existing mythologies. And it's almost an opportunity lost because maybe this Grinch packaging should have had some characteristics or homages not only to Kobe but Dr. Theodore Gissel himself. So who knows?
Yeah, so every year I come up with a list of the 5 things Jordan Brand and Nike can improve on in the coming year. So packaging has always been one of the things that I bring up, and you know, it- again, it's FUN things. So including storytelling pieces into the shoes or into the packaging is always something fun and things that you remember. You brought up the wine, bottle and the cork and all that stuff. Several years ago they did the Paranorman thing. I think was where you actually had to open the box to
Mhm.
be able, what is it like, you get a package in the mail, it's cut like that zip type thing, and you got to
Yep.
open it up to see what's inside. um but yeah, some of those things are just like really fun to be able to do. I can imagine being a kid and just like, you know if you're coming out with shoes every week, it's like, okay, well, it's a package that I want to unwrap. It's just like one of those things where like you want to be able to get into it, and that's the storytelling aspect of things. So, if the brands can't get it right, at least have that.
Yo, here's I almost don't want to say it on the air because it might be $1 billion idea.
Get paid for
What
it.
if what if there's
Get that money,
what if there's
Robbie.
an auxiliary company that makes commemorative boxes for your shoes? Dun dun dun. Like you make a whole thing. You make your own Jordan card and you throw that in there. Yeah, who knows? But that'd be a cool idea.
I
Yeah,
got a lot of I
Do
got a lot of
customizers tend to do the shoe boxes alongside their pairs? Like, I always butcher his name, Mock.
oh
Whenever or
Mosh, yeah,
Match, when he
Mosh.
made, yeah,
yep,
like, is there that boxing or that packaging component as
yeah,
well that he customizes?
yeah, for sure.
Like,
So
that's an easy win in a sense.
yeah, so I think like for like the closest I can relate to in my like journey through this sneaker thing was when it was actually like 4 years ago now. We launched the Air Zoom generation for StockX, right? And when I went to StockX, you know, there weren't that many people working there, right? Like, I was like employee 8 or 9, and it was like, what can we do that's cool that we have access to that we don't have the resources in terms of people to do all this stuff. But we lucked out in having Dan Gilbert, owner of the Cavaliers, be the investor in the company that connected us to that project. And we actually built the boxes out of the floor because they replaced the floor after that season, and it was a really fun project. I think I would love to have seen it get more, have more available and make it a big thing. But it went to charity. Like it was a really fun project, and like that element of it was my favorite part. Right, like I'm a LeBron fan. I'm a fan of the Zoom generation. I can even overlook that you destroyed my Kings your first night in the league. Like it's all okay. I'm not going to take it personal. But like putting together that story with the championship rings, with the floor from Quicken Arena, or the Q as they called it, and like being able to bring all those elements in is the most fun of you know that whole journey and that whole like I guess event, right? It was really a big deal for us to be able to even get to that point because it took a lot of back and forth with Nike. I don't want to speak too much to it, but maybe I'll get Josh on one day to talk about it. But like, there was a lot of there's a lot of there's a lot of regulation when it comes to Nike and who they partner with, what they do, what they're willing to give up, any kind of creative control, and that still is the case with the biggest names that you can think of that are collaborators, right? The Virgil Ablohs, the Jerry Lorenzos. There's still a lot of lines drawn in the sand saying this is where you don't cross, right? I mean, we as consumers might see it as like, yeah, Virgil like ripped the swoosh off and restitched it back on, but like, I mean, it makes me think of like the conversation. Another person we should get on, Nick DePaula. Like Marvin and I, it might actually been the first time we met in person was at the Soul Collector event in Santa Monica when the 11 Comforts released, right? And that shoe was originally Nick and Steve Mulholland like pitched that shoe to Tinker as a Jordan 11 high with a carbon fiber upper. And unfortunately, like it was okay with Tinker, but it didn't get past the next level of stamp of approval to make the collab happen, and we ended up with still a beautiful shoe, right? But like I also think about like I didn't get the carbon fiber box that we released that in, but it was one of the most beautiful boxes I've ever seen. I'm a big car guy, so like that whole element was like even more in my face. But like if you ever get the chance, or if I'm sure there's some on eBay, right? Like it was one of the most beautiful boxes I've ever seen, and super fragile, super crazy. But at the same time, you're talking about that one of a kind experience that I think almost inspires people to like chase after things that they normally wouldn't chase after, right? Sometimes, like you said about the briefcase, right? I'm not like a huge 17 fan, but if they came back with a briefcase, it would definitely be a selling point for me. In terms of like 2021, what are some of the like retros or anniversary type product that you think are big opportunities for Nike to like bring back and kind of represent to a new generation, or to just like rehook the old guys that are constantly trying to say like, I'm over this.
Well, it's tough
MVP.
for me is that when it comes to Jordan, like you always think about the Holiday 11. Coming up on the 25th anniversary of the All-Star game, the 96 All-Star game, Columbia 11s. Like I wanted that shoe to come back. And I mean, there's still time. I put it out in the IG sphere, I guess if you call it. So if Jordan Brand wants to go ahead and still make that shoe and, release it in the summertime or in the fall, like I'm open to it. They've done multiple 11s in a calendar year, so why not those? You're celebrating one of the iconic, pieces as far as like that All-Star game is concerned with the jersey even. Um, Boy, that packaging would be nuts too if they ended up doing some type of inspiration between them two. But um, yeah, just the creative thing happening. But yeah, so the Holiday 11, is always something. It seems like we're going to be getting the cool grays, um, which is still cool too because that hasn't come out, in the past, for the last 10 years. Um, it just hopefully they do it right. I've heard people talk about, well, what if it comes back with a mesh upper instead of that nubuck upper? And I'm like, I hope not because we want to remember things as they came out. But yeah, so I'm excited about those. I'm excited about the Carmine sixes, the first time Nike Air is going to come back on the back of those. Anything OG colorway wise, I like to see whether they can improve upon the last retro or get it as close to the original as they could. It's always a challenge. And anything else that is like a clean color palette, like there's these blue and white ones, like what are they called? The Turbo Blues or whatever they're called, the
Mhm.
Jordan ones that are coming out in a couple months. So new stuff like that. I'm always open to new color palettes. As far as like new design, we have yet to see. I guess it's gonna have to push me past like an Adapt 11 or another Adapt Air Jordan to push me over the edge to want to have to cop something like that. As well as the price. An Adapt 11 is what, $500? That's not gonna budge me.
Hmm.
So before I pose that same question to you, Robbie and Rohit, um, Marvin, how do you feel about so one thing that I have always been curious about is the material choices on retro product, right? The cool grays seem to be like a yeah, I mean they I don't want to say mess up, but they don't do the original materials all the time, right? Like sometimes they look like they attempt it, sometimes they do a decent job, and other times they're like a completely different ballpark, right? Is there a way that they could potentially release like a I don't know, two versions of the cool grays, right? Like there is the reason why I ask is because I'm kind of on the other side of that where like don't get me wrong, I'm going to take the this is where I realize that Jordan's got us by the balls, but like I'll take any cool gray 11 at this point just because I haven't had a pair in a long time and I'd be happy with either one. But I also was writing for Soul Collector and East Bay when the original sample of that Jordan, the cool grays with the mesh, the images were sent to us by Jordan to post. And then, of course, we posted them on the East Bay blog, on the Soul Collector, blog back in the day. And, the next day you've got people from Jordan saying, we changed that sample. We're going back to, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. But like that to me is also a very like focused story on my own journey and on my own experience that makes me think, I'd actually like to see both of these as a possibility. So I wonder if there's a way that we could, if you think there's a way that there's even a possibility that potentially different materials, like because it's again, I guess I'm answering this for myself, but I'm going to ask you. It's almost like we're putting ourselves in this position where like we want the exact replica of, as close to spec as possible from the ones that we're cherishing in our minds. But then also, how can we switch it up a little bit without it becoming like the $500 adapt, right? Because to me, the adapt is the only connection that I saw to the adapt was that original Tinker sketch, where it's like, no, it's not the same. Like, I get that you're throwing it out there and it's close, but honestly, I'd rather just have a regular Jordan 11 as the Tinker sketch, the same way you did the threes, because I'm into that, historical lineage and the behind the scenes story that was there when I first got into this. But enough of me rambling. What do you think about the materials?
So I almost think that even this year they started messing with the Jordan 11 Jubilee. So I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a men's version and there's a women's version, and there's two different style codes, but it's the same shoe, from my understanding. So in a sense, you can transition that into having two types of cool gray 11s for holiday of 2021, and it would make sense. So why not just give what everybody wants as far as like a general release with what MJ wore back in 2001 when he wore it with the new buck upper, but go ahead and make the mesh version, but limit it so that at least you get people that want the mesh version and still be able to get the cool grays, but try and get the mesh version. And I'm not, I hate to do this, but you can even up the price on that if you wanted to, if they're also going to limit it. So, in a sense, you can get two versions of that Cool Gray 11 and still, put money in the pockets of Jordan Brand. You know what I mean? And still get people talking about, oh wow, there is this other version of the 11. So, why not go for both? They're different shoes. It's still about the same, but they're still different shoes. Who
Yeah,
knows?
it's interesting. So, are there
Or
any
I'll, I'll,
retros
I'll
that?
I'll do this too. I'll even say, like, in the car world, as far as like Hondas, they got a DX model, an LX model, an EX model, EXL.
Yep.
Like, how far do you take it, as far as that branch of similarity goes, to where you have the lower tier of, say, an Air Jordan 3 with Jumpman on the back versus, going up the scale to wanting to get something that's purely for the purists, the OG, and have Nike Air with the shape all the same and everything like that. So, you know, how do you it might be too much for Jordan Brand to do to be able to create these tiers of sneakers in the same, type. Um, but that's just something that I put out there in the atmosphere, whether they take the idea or not.
I mean, that's a great analogy, though. It makes me kind of think of I forget what it was that released this, in 2020. That was it the Kyries that you didn't know what colorway you were getting out of the 4 or 5 pack?
Mystery box.
Yeah, I mean, there's just an element of the chase there that's appealing to people too, that they could have some fun with as
Even
well.
with the Jordan 19s back then, where you had the East, the West, and the Central, you
Yeah,
had if you were really into collecting, you'd have to get all, or you'd want to get all three.
yeah, yep.
So
Hmm. I'll keep mine short and sweet. The Kobe 6 Orange County is a very simple thing that's always had a special place in my heart. I've almost bought them for like $500 a couple times over the past 5-6 years, but if they bring that phenomenon box back, I'll lose my shit. But from a retro products standpoint, the Orange County 6, that's such a slept on. Now it won't be slept on. Now there's gonna be full attention on it. But that was one where it's like it was fucking on sale and I didn't buy it in 2010. It's like, bro, I played myself. Played myself on all the Kobe sixes. I was working at Nike. I was like, this Italian camo pack. I don't know about that. Even
it's
with an
part of the
employee
game,
discount.
Robbie.
Yeah, it
Yep.
sucks.
Part of the game.
How about you, Rowett? What's a retro sneaker you want to see come back?
Uh, I'll give a personal and then probably a corporate answer. Corporate answer, I think it's about that time frame now that maybe you start retroing the VC, because I think
Yes,
before
forgot.
LeBron, before Jordan, like he was kind of that stopgap between the two eras. And the way we were salivating, especially after that dunk contest performance and some of those other moments that just took your breath away, like he was that dude for a certain generation or almost a sub generation of basketball fan that we're always going to romanticize Vince Carter. So I'd say any one of his shocks or any sort of tie-in that you want to do, I think will go a long way in bridging that gap and letting people know that there was this era in between Jordan's last dance and LeBron's first one. Personally, I say this once a year. I'm happy that I actually have a bigger platform to say this. Airjet Flight Max, please. Airjet Flight, please. It was the Kobe 4 before the Kobe 4 in a sense. All the favorite players of mine from that era, Nash, Nowitzki, hell, even Bruce Bowen decided to wear this shoe. It's just a shoe that I always salivate and I get captivated on. And I know I'm preaching to a very small choir, but it's a dedicated choir. So, brethren, please sing along, and maybe somebody from Nike is listening.
That's those are great suggestions, and actually, it made me realize I was trying to think of the Alpha Project. Like it was a Nike Alpha Project that had the 5 dots on all the shoes, like the Flight Posit 2 flight. So that was I want to say that was like the the I don't not necessarily the beginning, but we'll have to actually get him on the podcast at some point. But like that was kind of Jason Petrie's like entry into the the
Bigger
bigger
things.
things that like where he's obviously handled the LeBron thing for so long now, but um, it's really tough to say because I obviously look at you know old stuff all the time and just constantly am reminded of stuff that I just think oh, this would be really cool, and then I have that moment of like you know like waiting for the brethren to sing in my choir and never hearing anyone. And so I'm honestly just happy that like I didn't get cool gray threes. I am interested in grabbing a pair of those. The cool gray 11s, obviously, I feel like that's one of the most wearable Jordan 11s, and I don't have the same protective nature towards that colorway that I would with like my playoffs or Space Jams, or like the Columbias, right? Like I would absolutely 100% love to see the Columbias come back. I don't know that I'd wear them the same way I would have, you know, in 97, 98 after I, beat them up for a while. But yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's just, man, it's just a beautiful shoe. And what is that? That's the 2001s that you pulled up, Mark?
Yeah, with the
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
yellow
Yep.
tint on the bottom.
Oh yeah, I forgot because the 2010s had that bluish, weird, like kind of, I don't know.
They're
The
icy.
whole thing about the vintage look nowadays, I actually wanted to get your guys' thoughts on. I didn't know if you wanted to bring that up, but maybe
Yeah,
on
yeah.
another
Let's
podcast.
no, let's talk about it. I think that's a good like outro conversation.
Okay.
It's garbage. I hate it. If you want your fucking Dior ones to look beat up, go wear your Dior ones till they're beat up. I mean, it drives me nuts. Like, I mean, and maybe it's just because I have black cements that are genuinely yellowed. I have Jordan 11s that are, I mean, Jordan 5s that are turning to piss yellow on the sides. Give it time. Don't pay anybody to make that happen for you. I think it's so stupid. That's my look.
Yeah,
It's
I agree
definitely a
with you.
bizarre
Team
thing
wear
to
your
me.
sneakers.
I
It's
mean,
hard to grasp.
is there any situation where you could see that be appealing, whether it's sneakers or otherwise? Uh, like, I mean, let's. I'm just going to use that example because you pulled out the 2001 Cool Grays, right? Those shoes, even though they're yellowed and aged, like they look beautiful to me. And
Oh
if
yeah.
I walked into a store right now and saw them, whether they were crispy, brand new, and a clearer, or I guess a little less yellowed outsole, I'd still be excited either way, probably. But I would also be like upset if they tried to sell us a vintage look Jordan 11, right? I feel like you could get away with that on, I don't know, Jordan 1 maybe or something where like people already do that. Not even doing it as like as in physically aging the shoe for yourself, but like we wear those shoes into the ground way more than we would a pair of 11s, right? Just at least in my experience and my approach to it. I don't know.
I would buy those yellowed. So like, let's call that gum bottom at this point. Release it with translucent gum. I mean,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Translucent gum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
That's a second $1 billion idea you've had, Robbie. I'm gonna start calling you young Elon
I
Musk
mean,
at this
so I
rate.
mean, I just think back, the 2016 navy and gum bottom 11 lows. That's the exact same color, just translucent, just about. Not exact, but I mean, pretty darn close. Where you can factory replicate that. But then you also have to do the shape. You also have to bring back that patent cut. You have to do. You just can't slap the yellow on the bottom and be like, okay, it's rustic. Like, no, it has to be something a little more to the dish.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, there's so many versions of shoes out there that I think still look good with that kind of aged, yellowed, vintaged look. But the idea of people like doing it just to do it to their shoes to make them look like it is super corny to me. I mean, wear your shoes. I mean, I look at shoes the same way I look at like selvage denim, right? Like you buy a pair of jeans like that, you wear them to make them your own, right? And this is a conversation that I literally just had with Russ Bankston. Like we create our own stories in these. Like as much as we like appreciate, collect, obsess over the bigger story, we also have our own personal stories, and I think that's the most important part about the sneaker thing. And going back to like I kind of already said this, but like if you're looking for a shoe to look like you've worn it a lot more than you did, maybe just try wearing the shoe. Like I mean, it doesn't take much more than a couple of weeks of beating up a pair of shoes for them to really look old, right? I'm really lazy when it comes to cleaning my shoes, and I could tell you from experience, I could get a brand new pair of whatever pair, and 2 3 weeks from now, if I don't pay attention and I'm not cleaning it on a regular basis, it looks like it's a years deep in my life kind of shoe, just because especially in the wintertime, right? You just naturally beat up the shoes more. So it's really weird to see that. I don't know. Like it makes me feel all sorts of weird ways, and I don't know how to express myself about it right now.
I would almost argue that, with the cleaning companies and how they have always pushed with, with the brushes and the cleaners and everything like that, if they do a pivot and they start working on providing materials that make shoes look vintage, you know what I mean? Like it could easily be a thing. But
Call Home Depot, man. Abrasive materials. It's called sandpaper.
and they will probably sell you sandpaper but still put their brand name on it.
Creep
So
Protect,
Yeah,
$18.
yeah. You'll be able to buy the Mister Clean and the Mister Sandpaper.
I will say though, Jason Mark brushes is a premium brush. That's my one plug. I'll end there. Full stop.
Yeah, that's a great conversation topic for another day, right? Like the idea of cleaning, the idea of what cleaners need to be, the idea of there's so many things that I see people doing now. Um, well, here this just showed up, so I just I just got a some of this Salon 40 like whitener stuff, right? Because obviously the guys that are doing the cleaning and customizing on the Discord, and just friends that are like, oh, I picked these old ass dunks up, from a flea market or a garage sale or something, and like freshen it up, and I'm like, I got this knowing that like I'll probably take months before I actually get around to using it, but it's fascinating to think of like, oh, I have like one pair specifically in mind that I know is still in a box, but like I have a pair of the Stussy Dunks from I don't know 2006 or something, right? And one of the shoes is super yellowed on one side. The other shoe looks brand new as if it came out of the box, but I was like, I don't necessarily want to wear it. I've never worn them because of that. I wanted to clean up the yellowing on one to at least make them match, right? I don't need to be Tracy McGrady out there with 15-year-old dunks, but like it's one of those things where like as soon as I sent this to the guys in the Discord, they're like, yo, you got to be super careful, like gloves, like and all the all the craziness that can go beyond just like cleaning and taking care of stuff. And at the end of the day, it's just like, is this really worth it? Because there's probably retro of whatever I think is not going to be around will ultimately come back, right? We're going to see, you know, a variation of Supreme Dunks this year. So it's like uh, everything is on the table apparently. So, but I don't know. I don't know. I think that's a really interesting conversation. We should actually do that someday because all these brands, cleaning and whatnot, present something interesting and unique, but it's also a lot of marketing talk and a lot of just pushing their own thing. And I respect it because it's like, hey, these guys have gotten to do a lot that and create a whole world that didn't exist prior to 15, 20 years ago. And then there's some guys that like I mean just as friends of the guys at Sneaker Lab, you know, they're obsessed with the idea of what bacteria can do as a cleaner. And because my girlfriend's into, the beauty world, like that whole conversation is so much bigger than sneakers, which is funny because like from the front you just see like Sneaker Lab cleaners and it's like, oh cool, a new cleaner and it's bacteria based and blah blah blah. But then you talk to Joe and he's like, he has like six different products. Like he's doing like all sorts of personal hygiene stuff, face stuff, all this. It's like, wow, you're like actually really, really crazy about this cleaning stuff, not just crazy about the sneaker stuff. So, yeah, maybe that would be actually a cool way to, I'd love to be able to get like, some sort of comparison and, conversation with multiple cleaning companies and people that are working for those companies because they all have they've all been able to find at least a piece of the market to keep themselves in business. So there's got to be some value to what they're doing there. But it's also interesting because like I don't have like any kind of personal like, oh, you got to use this brush or whatever. I'm just like, I don't know. I'll just grab whatever wipes are close and eventually like I use every product just to see what it's all like. So, but all right. Anyway, I'm rambling. So before we go, Marvin, why don't you let everybody know how they can find you and uh, anything else before we get off that you need to get out there into the universe? You put some gems out there. If you want to request, I mean, and I also will preface this by saying you pretty much put it out into the universe that the airship needed to come back and it eventually happened. So I'm all for supporting your wishes into the universe.
No, no, no more petitions. In the near future, people have probably wanted me to push the Air Jordan 2 petition, but I'm not gonna do that. There's other people that are, more interested in that shoe than I am. But no, there's really nothing as far as like what we want retroed. I put a bunch of stuff on my Instagram, and you guys can follow MJO23Dan. Again, my name is not Dan. People can still call me Dan. It's Marvin, but um, yeah, you can follow me on all those platforms: Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Pretty much the same name. Um, no, but I'm just really excited to have 2021 roll around, and hopefully with COVID, all that stuff's gonna go away. I know the vaccines are rolling out, and everyone just stay safe and wash your hands, social distance, all that good stuff, and hopefully we can come out of this.
Yes, sir. I'm 100% in agreement with that. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in with us. As always, we appreciate you guys. And Robbie, Rowett, you'll be able to find links to their social in the description. You'll be able to find Marvin, myself. More importantly for me, just follow the Sneaker History channels, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.
Later.
See ya.
Bye bye.